Welcome to this video on the basics of revolvers. My name is Dan Kidder and I've been a firearms instructor for 27 years and have taught federal agencies, police departments, and regular folks how to be safe and become better shooters for nearly 3 decades. This video was brought to you by Sportsman's Warehouse and is only available for those who have recently purchased a firearm. You may have recently purchased your first firearm or your 100th, but no matter your level of firearms experience, everyone can benefit from additional instruction. This video is the 5th part of a series of videos produced to help you become safer, more proficient, and more confident in using your firearm. Please make sure you watch the first video, The Basics of Gun Safety, before proceeding with this video. A link to that video is in the description below, or you can click here. Because laws differ in every locality, it is important to seek out a legal expert where you live to go over laws concerning firearms. While this video is a great way to become familiar with your gun, it does not replace hands-on training, and I encourage you to seek out a knowledgeable, professional firearms instructor where you live. Every Sportsman's Warehouse store in the country provides firearms training, and you can learn more about upcoming classes by asking at the customer service desk. By watching this video, you affirmatively agree to assume all liability for your use of this information and agree to hold Sportsman's Warehouse and me harmless for your use or misuse of this information. The information contained in this video is for instructional purposes only, and the user assumes all responsibility for how it is used. A revolver is an easy-to-use handgun with minimal controls for easy operation. It allows a shooter to have a reliable handgun that is less prone to jamming or malfunctions. The downsides to a revolver are that they have minimal ammunition capacity, take longer to load than a semi-automatic, and can be difficult to shoot accurately without a lot of practice. Because of the types of sights, the grip, and the amount of trigger pull necessary to shoot them, they take more intentional effort to be accurate. All of these can be mitigated by training, practice, and technique. We will cover some methods to help you improve your accuracy and make the revolver easier to shoot, load, unload, cock, and decock, as well as some tips for properly maintaining and cleaning your revolver in this video. You can also watch our video on revolvers versus semi-automatics by clicking here to see more about the pros and cons of a revolver for self-defense, hunting, and target shooting. A revolver is a simple design that uses a round cylinder to hold the cartridges in individual chambers that rotate into alignment with the barrel. The barrel is a metal tube that the bullet fires through on its way to the target. Inside the barrel, called the bore, are grooves cut into the inside called rifling. This rifling causes the bullet to spin, giving it greater stability, accuracy, range, and velocity. At the end of the barrel is a precision machined area called the crown. The vortex action of the gases passing over the crown can be disrupted and decrease accuracy if the crown is marred, say by being dropped. On the front of the open cylinder is an ejection rod that connects through the center of the cylinder to an extractor star. When pressed, the rod transfers force to the star-shaped extractor, which pulls the shells from the cylinder. The frame of the revolver includes the grip, the cylinder release, the barrel, and the sights. The action includes the trigger, the hammer, and the gears that rotate the cylinder. All revolvers have a hammer, but that hammer may be external or internal and not visible. Revolvers can fire in one of 2 modes, double action and single action. Some revolvers are capable of firing in both modes, and some can only fire in one mode. In single action, pulling the trigger only performs one action. It releases the hammer to fire the gun. For single action, the hammer must first be manually cocked by pulling back on the hammer. It is held in place by an internal spur that is released when the trigger is pulled. The trigger pull of a revolver in single action mode is much lighter and shorter than in double action mode. If the revolver is a single action only gun, then this cocking action must be performed for every shot. In double action mode, the trigger performs 2 functions. It cocks the hammer and then releases it for firing. This trigger pull is much harder and longer, but it is typically safer because you are less likely to accidentally fire the gun when you are nervous or excited. To fire in double action mode, you simply apply firm and steady pressure on the trigger until the gun fires. While you are pulling the trigger, the internal mechanism will cause the hammer to move to the rear and then suddenly fall forward, striking the firing pin into the primer of the cartridge. Simply pulling the trigger again will rotate the cylinder to align a fresh cartridge with the barrel and the firing pin. There are a few different ways that revolvers can be loaded. Some use a swing-out arm to move the cylinder to the side so that all of the individual chambers can be accessed at the same time. Others use a hinge to tilt the front of the revolver and the cylinders forward. And finally, some use a loading gate that flips open and the cylinder is rotated to expose one chamber at a time. We will cover both flip-out cylinders and loading gates, as these will apply to the majority of revolvers on the market. For a flip-out cylinder, there will be a cylinder release latch on the side of the frame. It may be a button that is pressed, like with this Ruger GP100, or it may be a sliding mechanism that either slides forward, like this Model 66 from Smith & Wesson, or slides to the rear, like this Colt. Activating the cylinder release unlocks the cylinder so that it can be pushed out of the frame for loading or reloading. Start by holding the pistol in the strong hand in a firing grip. Activate the cylinder release and slide 2 fingers of your support hand underneath the trigger guard and push on the cylinder. Leave those 2 fingers inside the cylinder housing and transfer the gun to the support hand. The fingers give you a handle to hang the gun on. To load, you can tip the gun downward so that the shells do not slide back out after you place them in the cylinder. Place a cartridge in each of the chambers of the cylinder with your strong hand and then return the gun to a shooting grip. Firmly but gently close the cylinder, returning it to its housing. Make sure that you slightly rotate it until it locks into position, sort of like locking a steering wheel in your car. Without activating the cylinder catch, push the cylinder with the 2 fingers of your support hand to make sure that the cylinder is locked into position. The revolver is now loaded and ready to fire. Another way to load a revolver is by using speed loaders. These hold the cartridges in position and lock them into a device so that they can be all inserted into the revolver at once. Either push down on the speed loader or twist the knob to release the cartridges so that they can drop into the cylinder. Let the loader fall to the ground and close the cylinder. One thing that is important to know is the direction that your cylinder rotates. You can tell this either by pulling the trigger on a revolver that you have verified is unloaded, or by looking at the marks on the side of the cylinder. There's a notch with a shallow sloping divot. The direction that that divot points is the direction that the cylinder rotates. This allows you to partially load a cylinder and be able to close it so that all of the loaded rounds are in a sequential firing position. Keep in mind that the chamber underneath the hammer and in alignment with the barrel will rotate out of position when the trigger is pulled. So to maximize capacity of a partially loaded cylinder, you must align an empty chamber under the hammer when you close the cylinder. To unload a flip-out cylinder revolver, you just reverse the process. Open the cylinder by pressing the release and pushing out the cylinder with 2 fingers of your support hand. Transfer the gun to your support hand and then tip the gun up and the unfired cartridges will slide into your dominant hand. Visually inspect the chambers to ensure that the gun is unloaded. I also like to count the number of cartridges in my hand. If you are removing fired cartridges, they will expand into the chamber when fired and may not fall out. To remove these, there is a rod on the front of the cylinder. Use the flat of the palm of your dominant hand to press this down firmly. A star-shaped extractor will lift the rims of the cases up and allow them to fall out of the chambers in the cylinder. Do not try to catch these as they may be hot. Just let them fall to the ground. If you're going to fire the revolver again, then go ahead and tilt it downward and reload it. If you're done firing, you can close the empty cylinder and put the gun away, or leave the cylinder open and set it on the bench with the barrel pointed downrange. To load a gate-style revolver, tilt the revolver downward and flip open the loading gate. Since most gate-style revolvers are single action only, you need to move the hammer backward a single position. This is the half-cock position of the hammer. It acts as a safety by preventing the firing pin from resting on the primer of the cartridge underneath it. It also allows the cylinder to freely rotate. Rotate an empty chamber underneath the exposed loading port and slide a cartridge into the chamber. Rotate the cylinder to the next chamber and repeat the process until all of the chambers have been loaded, and then flip the loading gate closed. To unload this type of revolver, flip open the loading gate and tip the revolver up. Most of the time, an unfired cartridge will just slide out. For a fired cartridge that is expanded, you will need to slide the tab under the barrel to the rear and a rod will push the casing out of the chamber. Repeat this for each chamber. Once all of the chambers have been unloaded this way, slowly rotate the cylinder while looking into the loading port to verify that all of the chambers are empty. I like to spin it around 2 or 3 times just to make sure I haven't missed any chambers in the cylinder. The gun now can be reloaded if you plan to continue shooting or are loading it to carry it, or it can be stored unloaded. The fundamentals for revolver shooting are the same as for any handgun: grip, stance, sight alignment, trigger press, breath control, and follow through. The grip for a revolver is different than the grip for a semi-automatic. To properly grip a revolver, you hold it in your shooting hand with the webbing of your hand as high on the back of the grip as possible. Because the grip is a different shape than the squarer grip of a semi-automatic, which allows the magazine to hold the cartridges, the grip of a revolver can be much more ergonomically comfortable than a semi-automatic, but only if the revolver properly fits your hand. If the grip is too large or too small, it can be difficult to comfortably hold the revolver. The size of many revolver grips can be modified by replacing the grips or by sliding a sleeve over the existing grips to make it larger. Your trigger finger should lie against the side of the revolver outside of the trigger guard and pointing at the target. For a two-handed shooting grip, which is the most accurate and easy to control, place the flat of your support hand underneath the trigger guard and curl your fingers over your dominant hand. Squeeze this hand firmly to lock the dominant hand in place on the grip. You may either cross your thumbs in the rear or have them both on the same side and curl them on the side of the grip. Crossing your thumbs may interfere with the movement of the hammer and may also develop a bad habit in that you may cross your thumbs when transitioning to a semi-automatic that can cause you an injury from the movement of the slide. Curling your thumbs will keep them out of the way and further help to lock your grip into place to control recoil. Your thumb should never point forward, as there is a gap between the cylinder and the barrel that allows hot gases to escape out of the gap, and these can burn your thumbs if they are over that area. To cock the revolver, start with a proper grip and use the thumb of your support hand to pull back on the hammer while maintaining firm control. If your thumb slips off of the hammer, the gun may fire. For a single action revolver, pull the hammer back until it clicks twice. The first click is the half cock position, and the gun will not fire from this position. To fully cock the gun for firing, the hammer must be cocked all of the way. For a double action revolver, there is usually just a single position that fully cocks the hammer. To decock the revolver, hold the gun with your strong hand and keep the revolver pointed in a safe direction. Grasp the hammer with the thumb and index finger of your non-dominant hand and pinch it firmly. Control the hammer as you pull the trigger and ease the hammer down. If you fail to control the hammer, the gun may fire. Practice this several times with snap caps or an unloaded gun before you attempt this with a loaded revolver. Some instructors advocate for placing the non-dominant thumb between the hammer and the frame of the gun. Since some models of revolvers have the firing pin attached to the hammer, and also because it can be difficult to extricate your pinched thumb, I find that the method of pinching the hammer works better for all makes of revolvers with any exposed hammer. There are three basic stances for shooting handguns. These stances help to provide a stable platform for practicing shooting and help minimize the unnecessary movement while allowing you to isolate different fundamentals. In a defensive encounter or while hunting, these stances may not be possible, but for practicing your fundamentals, they are necessary to employ. The revolver may also be fired from a bench rest position for working on your aim and for zeroing the sights or an optic. The isosceles stance has the shooter stand with their feet about shoulder width apart and their body perpendicular to the target. The arms are extended out in front of the shooter with the gun gripped in both hands and the elbows rotated to the outside. The shooter leans forward with their nose out in front of their toes. The knees are slightly bent, the head is erect, and the eyes are locked on the target, and the gun is raised up to the level of the eyes. The Weaver stance is more like the stance for firing a hunting rifle. It looks a little like a boxer stance. The non-dominant foot points at the target, and the dominant foot is parallel to the target. The non-dominant shoulder points toward the target. The elbow of the hand holding the gun is slightly tucked into the body or out at the side. The head slightly tilts downward to come to the level of the gun. The non-dominant arm pulls the gun toward the shooter, and the dominant hand pushes the gun away from the body with dynamic tension. This push and pull motion helps control recoil and minimize movement of the gun. For the modified isosceles stance, you use the same stance as for the isosceles, but place your dominant leg slightly back with your foot parallel to the target. This is a more relaxed and less fatiguing way to have the best of both worlds for longer range sessions. Sight alignment is looking through the rear sight of the revolver and aligning it with the front sight. Because many smaller revolvers have just a notch cut into the top of the gun for a rear sight, they can be somewhat difficult to aim properly. Many larger revolvers have more prominent target-style sights that are easier to align. To properly align the sights, look down the barrel of the gun from the top, bringing the top of the gun up to your eyes. Place the post of the front sight in the middle of the notch of the rear sight. You want the top of the front and rear sights to appear even, and you want to have equal spacing on either side of the front sight. We refer to this as equal height and equal light. Once you are able to comfortably align the sights with your eye, then you can place the aligned sights on the target. Place the top edge of the front sight where you want the bullet to hit. This target, front sight, rear sight, eye alignment is called the sight picture. Many single-action revolvers will have this minimal sight channel obstructed by the hammer. If there's an external hammer, it must first be cocked before the sights will be visible. Before cocking the revolver, point it in the general direction of your target and then use your non-dominant thumb to cock the revolver. It is very important when doing this that you exercise good trigger discipline, keeping your trigger finger outside of the trigger guard, straight alongside the frame of the gun, and point it at the target to avoid accidentally firing the gun. Using your dominant thumb to cock the revolver moves the sight out of your natural point of aim and also weakens your master grip on the gun. If you find your shots are going high on the target, it is likely that the front sight is extending above the rear sight and the gun needs to be tilted slightly downward so that the front sight is even with the rear sight. Activating the trigger of a revolver is called trigger pull or trigger squeeze, but I prefer to use the term trigger press. It is the controlled application of increasing pressure on the trigger until the gun fires. If you squeeze your hand while pressing the trigger, it can move the gun off target. If you pull the trigger too rapidly, it can also move the gun. This is called slapping the trigger. For a proper and accurate trigger press, you only move your trigger finger while maintaining your proper grip. The trigger moves straight to the rear with no sideways pressure. Just the pad of the finger is used on the trigger. For a single action revolver, less trigger finger is needed on the trigger. For a double action revolver, you can slide more of your finger onto the trigger before you begin your press. With a double action revolver, the trigger is much harder to activate and it must travel much farther before the gun fires. For a single action revolver, the trigger is very light and crisp. Focus on smoothly and cleanly pressing the trigger with minimal movement. Dry fire practice with an unloaded gun pointed in a safe direction is a good way to become more proficient at pressing the trigger without moving the gun. Another trick is to place a fired shell casing or a dime on the top of the barrel and work on pressing the trigger with the gun unloaded without it falling off. Breath control is simply holding your breath at the time that the shot is fired. You take in a breath and let out just a little bit so that you're not holding your breath with fully expanded lungs. Hold your breath while you press the trigger. Fire however many rounds you desire, then let out your breath and take a full in and out breath or two and repeat the process. This prevents the movement of your breathing from moving the gun as you shoot. There is a tendency after the shot is fired to move our heads, tighten or adjust our grip, or just let everything relax. If we do any of these too soon, it can move the gun at the moment it is fired and change our point of impact. Follow through is keeping everything exactly the same before, during, and after the shot is fired. Another tendency is to shove the gun forward to try to overcome the recoil. This can make our shots go low on the target or miss it completely by shooting underneath it. Proper follow-through is letting the gun go through its natural arc of recoil and only firing the next shot when the gun naturally returns to the target. It's helpful to keep the trigger pulled to the rear while the gun goes through this arc and then release it when the sights are back on target and begin pressing the trigger again. A clean and well-maintained revolver will function more reliably and also shoot better and smoother. A revolver is very easy to clean, but you will want to get either a universal or a caliber-specific cleaning kit. To see more about choosing a cleaning kit, you can watch our video by clicking here. Before cleaning any gun, make sure to verify that it is unloaded. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. Store the ammunition away from the work area so that it does not get exposed to cleaning solutions. It is also a good idea to wear safety glasses to avoid getting solvent into your eyes. To clean a revolver, you will want to run a patch with solvent or CLP down the barrel. Because many revolver barrels cannot be accessed from the cylinder end, you run the rod with the patch from the muzzle end. Be cautious not to scratch or ding the crown of the muzzle while running the rod down the barrel. Some cleaning kits will have a brass insert to protect the crown. Coat the inside of the bore with solvent and let it sit for a while to loosen all of the fouling. While that is marinating, take your damp patch and run it inside each of the individual chambers of the cylinder. Use another damp patch to wipe down all of the external surfaces. Dip a cleaning brush into your solvent and work it around the cone at the rear of the barrel that aligns with the chambers of the cylinder. Take your damp brush and work it along the back of the cylinder where the ratchets are located and along the back wall of the opening where the firing pin and the pawl that spins the cylinder are located. Once you have applied solvent and let it soak for a little bit, take a clean patch and wipe all of the solvent and fouling off. Place a bronze or nylon brush on your rod and run it back and forth down the barrel several times and repeat the process for each chamber of the cylinder. Take a clean patch and run it down the barrel to remove any fouling and lead. Take another clean patch and run it through each chamber of the cylinder and under the extractor star. Oil lightly according to your user's manual, and then lightly dampen a clean patch with oil and run it down the barrel and into each of the chambers of the cylinder. Place a drop on the crane, the hinge that allows the cylinder to swing out, and on the cylinder release. Wipe down the outsides of the revolver with a clean, dry cloth. Revolvers require very little maintenance, but it is advised to have them routinely serviced by a competent gunsmith so that the internal mechanism can be cleaned, oiled, and the timing can be adjusted. One way to know if the timing of the cylinder needs adjusting is if you see lead fouling on the cone at the back of the barrel. This means that the cartridges are not properly aligning with the barrel and little bits of lead are being shaved off the bullet as it bridges the gap and passes down the barrel. Another area that may need adjusting is tightening of screws. The ejector rod screw is reverse threaded and tightens to the left and loosens to the right. Make sure that it is tight. Also, the side plate screw can work loose, and the screw that holds the cylinder in place on the crane can work loose. It is recommended to only use a hollow ground gunsmithing screwdriver on these, as the tapered edge of a standard screwdriver can slip and mar the metal or the finish. There are thousands of accessories on the market for your revolver. Just as many shooters find that optics for aiming are a real enhancement to a semi-automatic, placing optics onto a revolver can help you be more accurate and faster on target. This can include non-magnified red dots or magnified scopes. Many hunters prefer a large caliber revolver over a hunting rifle for the challenge. A wide assortment of lights and lasers are available for revolvers. Some clamp onto the barrel and some replace the grip panels with panels that contain integrated aiming and illumination devices. A good holster that is custom fit to your revolver will keep it where you can access it and also protect it from falling out, damage, and rust. Many types of leather holsters can retain moisture and cause rusting. They can also deform over time, and they risk bending into the trigger and can fire when holstering. A custom molded plastic polymer or Kydex will not hold moisture or lose its shape. And of course, a good holster requires a good quality belt designed for carrying a firearm. There are also chest holsters that are great for horseback riding, ATVing, or hunting. And the best thing about carrying a revolver is the gun belt rig that was worn by the cowboys. Snap caps are inert, machined aluminum cartridges that let you practice safe loading and unloading. They're also great for dry fire practice as they contain a silicone insert in the primer pocket to protect the firing pin. These are especially useful for revolvers that have the firing pin attached to the hammer. They are also a good way to identify recoil anticipation or shoving the gun forward by randomly loading them into your cylinder during live fire to see the flinch when they do not fire. Most revolvers allow you to very easily swap out the grips. Many people prefer softer rubber grips to the hard wood grips that come with their gun. Others wish to resize the grip or change its contours so that it's more comfortable for their hands. They even make slip-over rubber grip adjustment sleeves so that you can quickly add texture for a better grip. Speed loaders allow you to carry additional rounds neatly locked into a round configuration. You simply place them into the cylinder and rotate the knob or push down and let the rounds fall into the chambers of the cylinder. There are also pouches to hold these speed loaders or to hold a specific number of cartridges needed to load your revolver that attach to your belt for quick and easy access. Whatever kind of gun you choose to carry, make sure that you practice to become proficient with it. A revolver is still a great gun to carry for self-defense because of its reliability and ease of use, but you still need to practice to become proficient with aiming, firing, loading, unloading, cocking, and decocking it. They are a good choice for hunting, and the largest and most dangerous animal I ever took was with a revolver. They are also a great choice for those hiking in areas where you may encounter dangerous animals. The key aspect of training is to be safe with your firearm, and if you haven't already, I suggest watching our first video in this series, The Basics of Gun Safety, before you proceed to practice. There's a link in the description. And while a video is a great way to get information, nothing beats a hands-on class. Every Sportsman's Warehouse store in the nation offers concealed carry classes, and even if you're not wanting to get your concealed carry permit, these classes are a great place to start for learning gun safety and the basics of using your revolver. Check with your local customer service desk for information on the next class. Thank you for watching this video, and if you're interested in learning more, be sure to watch our other videos in the series on the basics of rifles, the basics of shotguns, the basics of semi-automatic pistols. We'll have links in the description below. Shoot straight, be safe, and have fun.